Well, I believe we are at a paradigm shift with regards to AI, that's for certain. A lot of people will lose their jobs because AI is simply going to replace human beings in a lot of production, a lot of services jobs, things like that. We're just at the beginning of that stage of this new era which we're going to be in with regards to AI. The developments we're seeing at the moment are similar to those we saw at the beginning of the 19th century with regards to the Industrial Revolution. And it's a bit like, for example, the horse-drawn cart. Back in the, I believe, the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of coach drivers were suddenly replaced by people who are driving cars. So something similar will happen here. The biggest prize of them all is basically world domination in the field of AI. And that's what's happening at the moment. I mean, the US is dominating, but China is catching up very, very rapidly. In the very short term, AI may be overhyped as a general theme because some of those companies are not going to grow at the same rate they have in the past. And valuations may be overstretched for some of these companies, and therefore we could see corrections. But when it comes to the long-term picture, as a long-term 10 years and more investment, I do believe that AI is here to stay. Big AI players in the US who have a lot of cash available to them, they can invest in infrastructure, they can invest in R&D, they can invest in growing their business, and they're doing so very, very successfully. So it's not as if these companies are not growing and not making money. They are. And it is very likely that will continue to do so. Well, the monetization of AI at the moment is in the data centers because we are now storing everything that we used to store physically in the cloud. And for that, you need a lot of computing power. Also, a lot of companies are now using AI on a daily basis. And that also needs a lot of computing power. And therefore, all these data centers are huge investments which a lot of US and global companies are making at the moment. So that is basically where a lot of the money is flowing in, but that's also where a lot of money is being made. And that's why you're seeing the likes of Nvidia beating earnings quarter by quarter by quarter. And I'm not talking about 10% earnings, we're talking 50% plus earnings quarter on quarter because these profits at the moment just keep on coming. I believe people's jobs are already under threat when it comes to AI. You can see a lot of the call centers, especially in countries abroad such as India, for example, are already suffering because a lot of their staff has been replaced by AIs that can do that job more cheaply basically than the call centers can. So we're already seeing that shift. What we're also seeing probably in the future is waiting staff being replaced by perhaps robots or tablets with AI on them, and you just order your meal and then maybe a person brings it to you, but you no longer order through a person. And we're already seeing that in some of the UK airports at the moment. So I believe those people who are in service jobs might be replaced in a lot of these. And those people that survive this new AI trend are those who learn how to work with AI, how to improve their productivity with the help of AI. So do I think that countries may restrict the use of AI because basically it would be too detrimental to their population with regards to jobs? I cannot see such a scenario happening because you would lose competitive advantage compared to other countries. And yes, you want to protect your labor force, but you probably can't. So for that reason, I don't think that's likely to happen, no. Well, the global economy, especially now in the age of AI, is very dependent on energy. And it really is a question for each country to decide, do we want to be energy independent? Or do we want to rely on our allies and neighbors, which in the future may no longer be allies, who knows? And also, do we prefer to have cheap energy, or are we willing to pay more for a longer time, but be independent. And we saw that, for example, with Nord Stream 2 and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Germany had, after the nuclear disaster in Japan, decided to rid itself of all its nuclear plants, and then wanted to import LNG and gas from Russia. And then the war happened and they suddenly had to backtrack, and that caused a huge amount of damage to the German economy and to Europe in general. Since then, we've moved back to trying to become more independent. But the problem is, if you want to go back to nuclear energy, it takes decades to plan and build these plants. And also when you look at wind energy, you need a lot of land and a lot of infrastructure to be built to make up the shortfall, which we, in some countries, as I say, Germany, have created ourselves. Is biotech the next big thing? I don't think so. I mean, we've talked about Beyond Meat, for example, for years now. It looked extremely promising, especially since we all know that cows are polluting the environment and that eating too much meat is not very good for us. But if you look at the Beyond Meat share price, it's absolutely collapsed. And yes, in 2025, towards the beginning of October, I believe, it rallied very drastically. But that was because of the sort of GameStop meme type retail investment craze. But then the share price collapsed once more. So for these sort of biotech goods, there doesn't seem to be the sort of demand we would have expected to see, years ago. And I think the similar things will happen with regards to lab-grown organs. I'm not sure we're going to be that sure that everybody is going to embrace that. And it might be a little bit like a genetically modified food, which at first was also looked at from a very critical angle by a lot of consumers. So I think biotech definitely does have a future, but it will more be on the lines of lab-grown bacteria or yeast, which can then program. So for microchips and things like that. So it'll be mini computers, but from a bioengineering background, which I believe will be the big game changer in the future, more than any of the sort of adaptations that most people think of when they think of biotech. I think what we massively underestimate with regards to biotech is the fact that AI can lead us to discoveries far, far quicker than would have been possible even 10 years ago. So I think we will see biotech breakthroughs in the next decades, which we aren't even capable of thinking of at the moment. What those are, no one has an idea. But I think that will be a game changer going forward. We use rare earth in everything from phones to computers to electric vehicle motors, our military and also aerospace technology. So we need rare earth, and there's a huge demand for these, only growing demand actually. And the problem is potentially that 70% or roughly 70% of the output with regards to rare earth comes from China. And if you look at the subsequent stages, the processing, the refinery of rare earths and all that, China holds about 90% of the world's refinery processes there. So that leads to potential geopolitical tensions and dependencies, because at the end of the day, yes, we depend very, very heavily on China when it comes to rare earth. And as long as they provide us with the rare earth we need, everything may be fine. But if that were to stop for some reason in the future, it would have a huge impact on our global economies. I believe the biggest blind spot to be the potential invasion of Taiwan by China. Yes, we've been talking about it for years, but it may well happen within our lifetimes. And if that is the case, it will have a very negative impact on the global economy. And the reason I'm saying this is because if you look at US foreign policy, there seems to have been a shift by President Trump and his allies that may lead to us, and by us I mean NATO and the Western Hemisphere, not interfering if China were, for example, to blockade Taiwan and then perhaps even invade Taiwan, because the US president doesn't seem to be keen on starting a war, especially now that he's said that he has stopped, apparently, 8 wars in the world. You would have a very sharp, very severe bear market, probably a drop of perhaps even 50% of the US stock market, and AI stocks particularly, because you would have a lot of fear in the market, increased volatility. Then you would have a ripple effect on semiconductor-dependent sectors such as automobiles, AI, electronics, and so forth. And it would lead to the fear also of all these semiconductors basically not being available to the production processes all over the globe for these goods. So basically, because of that supply disruption, the equity markets will probably sell off very, very rapidly, very, very aggressively, and it would have very negative implications on the world economy, and we would probably all head into a recession. With the large-scale adoption of AI across the globe and the resulting huge energy demand, we can see things changing in the world already. And I think it's going to have a profound impact on all sectors in the years to come.